What is up, everybody out there in podcast land? Welcome to the latest, the greatest episode of The Fortress of Rock. August the 1st, 2025. Are you kidding me? We're already in August? Maybe a month and a half left in summer? Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous, but none of us can stop the hands of time. We can't beat Mother Nature. The seasons will roll on. Summer, fall, winter, spring, and then we'll be back to summer again a long time from now. But until then, each and every Friday night, of course, you have the Fortress of Rock waiting for you. This is episode 205 of the Fortress. I, of course, am your humble and gracious host, the Ayatollah of rock and roll, the Maestro, Kevin Crane. I am fired up this week. I was so fired up on my other podcast, Sports Frenzy 2.0, that I think I lost a friend or two. I went overboard a little bit discussing the death of my all-time favorite baseball player Ryne Sandberg, tying that into the death of Ozzy Osbourne and the death of Hulk Hogan. And I admit, I went off the rails a little bit. Part of me feels like I should apologize to the people of New York, but then again, I'm not going to. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about news of the world when it pertains to rock and roll here on August the 1st. Of course, News of the World, our first segment every Friday night, is our tribute to the late, great Freddie Mercury and Queen. And we will bring Ozzy Osbourne back in. Of course, last week we talked about his passing. I relayed a story or two about personal memories of Ozzy and how much Blizzard of Oz in particular, that album meant to me growing up. And obviously Ozzy meant a lot to a lot of people. Because this past week, on July the 30th, in Birmingham, England, his hometown, there was a massive funeral procession for the Prince of Darkness. Broke my heart to see Sharon Osbourne in that state, and it stinks. It absolutely stinks that this is the world we live in, where it's paparazzi and phone cameras, and they're catching people at their worst, most vulnerable moments. And I hate that. I really could have done without seeing Sharon Osbourne breaking down. But there are reasons, I guess, why people stop and gawk at car accidents. Because I guess a lot of us, depends on what button you push, but a lot of us have those weird, crazy, kooky things in us that we just can't show respect and turn away. Now, this instance, I would have been more than happy to have not seen any pictures from this. I don't know if it's me. I'm not a funeral guy. I will definitely honor close friends and icons in the world of music, sports, movies, whatever, that have influenced me throughout my life, but I don't need to see their loved ones suffering. And then I think things took a better turn on July the 31st, where they had the private memorial on the estate. Lots of heavy hitters from the world of hard rock showed up. We will not get into that. We're not going to get into the showboating here and list names of superstars who were there because it doesn't matter. What matters is the legacy of Ozzy Osbourne. And I'll tell you what, I think it's absolutely cool, beyond belief, that he was buried by a nice scenic lake on his estate. So all in all, a very fitting tribute to one of our heavy metal gods. Rest in peace, Ozzy Osbourne. And then we did have one other unfortunate passing in the world of rock and roll over the last week. And this one was kind of odd to me, because there are certain bands where I know their history. Van Halen comes to mind. Other bands where I love them, but I maybe don't know as much as a diehard fan would. And this would be one of those instances with Iron Maiden. Now, if you'd asked me who was the first lead singer of Iron Maiden, I would have said Paul Di'Anno. That is not the case. The first singer for Iron Maiden unfortunately passed away within the last week, and his name was Paul Mario Day. Of course, I'm probably thinking of recorded Iron Maiden only. And a lot of the bands that we love, die-hard fans know this. A lot of the bands that we love, if you don't take the time to look into their history, you probably don't know who the original members were, for the most part. There's going to be some curveballs in there. So thoughts and prayers go out to the Iron Maiden fan base, the band, and of course, family and friends of Paul Mario Day. So let's get into the music, shall we? Let's get things going here on a positive note with some concert news. A good one and a bad one. Not much this week, of course, as we head into the fall and the winter. Not a lot of bands planning tours when the weather gets rough throughout a big portion of the United States and Canada. But the Stray Cats are going out again. The original, or the classic trio, I should say. Again, I don't want to upset anybody, because if you look up the Stray Cats, I'm pretty sure that the trio that we know and love is not the original trio. The original lineup for the Stray Cats. But the big news here, on top of the fact that the Stray Cats are coming back, 20 dates. There is a mystery 21st date in there. And I'm noticing this a lot more lately. Mammoth did this, where they had a couple dates scheduled but won't tell anybody what they are, where they're playing. Same thing here with the Stray Cats, although it's only one date. So it's 20 dates plus one mystery date for the Stray Cats in the United States in October and November. And the news is we will be there. We have got tickets to see the Stray Cats at the end of October in Indianapolis, Indiana. So that review will be coming up early in November of this year. So we've got another concert on the slate for you. Now that's the good news. the bad news is Stevie Nicks, and this just broke within a couple hours of when we were getting into the studio and recording here on August the 1st. Stevie Nicks, and her connection to Billy Joel, please don't take this the wrong way, but both of them have just had a miserable, in many respects, 2025, especially when it comes to health. Now Stevie Nicks has a fractured shoulder. She is going to have to reschedule 9 dates, North American dates, in September and October as she goes through rehabilitation. She claims, her camp says, that everything from November on is still good to go. So that's when she should be healed up and ready to go back out again. But once again, Stevie Nicks has not rescheduled yet. She will reschedule 9 dates in September and October due to a fractured shoulder. All right, the revolving door with the Foo Fighters. When it comes to who's going to sit behind the drum kit, the revolving door keeps spinning. And I understand Dave Grohl can't front the band like he wants to behind the drum kit. Obviously, a lot of people going, why doesn't Dave Grohl just play the drums for the Foo Fighters? Because he can't connect with the audience the same way. So I get it. I do get it. And he's still got issues he's dealing with. We're not going to rehash those, but we know that he recently fired Josh Freese, who was very briefly the new drummer for Foo Fighters. And now we just had the baseball trade deadline a few days ago. Now we might as well have a rock and roll trade deadline, because it seems like that's what's happening a lot lately, especially with drummers. Josh Freese will now rejoin a band that he was with a while back, 9 Inch Nails, while the drummer for 9 Inch Nails, Ilan Rubin, is headed to the Foo Fighters. Next question, of course, the inevitable next question is, are we getting a new album? Are we going to get a 2026 tour of North America? Let's see how this plays out. Let's see how the chemistry works with Ilan Rubin and the rest of the guys in the Foo Fighters. Very difficult, fragile time for Dave Grohl's band still. Now let's talk about new content to get us through to the end of News of the World and lead us into breakdown. We've got some live albums. We got Reissue. We've got a new live album. I'm not the biggest fan in the world anymore of live albums. When I was growing up, live albums were awesome. You had legendary live albums like Kiss Alive 2, Peter Frampton Comes Alive. You just don't get it anymore. The music industry has shifted and changed so much. I honestly couldn't tell you what the last legendary live album was. I would imagine maybe one of the Unplugged albums, if you want to call that a concert album. But David Gilmour, we'll start off with David Gilmour, is releasing a live film, a live concert film, and then releasing the companion music a month later. David Gilmour, live at the Circus Maximus in Rome, will be in IMAX theaters on September the 17th. And then again, the accompanying soundtrack, he's got that coming out. If you can wait a month, here's the thing. If you can wait a month for live at the Circus Maximus Rome, you don't want to, I mean, seeing it in IMAX is obviously it. That's how you want to experience it. But if you want to own it, and you got an awesome home theater setup with surround sound, again, the theatrical release, September the 17th, 1 month later, October the 17th, on Blu-ray and DVD. You can get live at the Circus Maximus in Rome from David Gilmour. There's a live album coming out. I don't like to, again, discuss live albums because they're a dime a dozen. So he does have a live album coming out, basically supporting his last solo album, which dropped with a massive thud. So you can do the research on that. I just don't care. Sorry. Foghat, though, I do care about. Fool for the City, the classic 1975 album from Foghat, is getting a 50th anniversary reissue, a re-release. That will be out September the 12th. And in addition to the original album, you will get 8 new live songs, never before released, from a concert from 1975. Now, my understanding is because of physical limitations. This is why I'm a CD guy and not a vinyl guy. As this Fool for the City reissue comes out, it will be on 2 CDs or 2 LPs. But if you buy the vinyl, you will not get 2 extra songs from the live recording. I believe it was recorded in Chicago. So you will not get all 8 songs. You will only get 6 songs from the live recording. On the vinyl version, you'll get all 8 on the CD version. So once again, the expanded 50th anniversary reissue of Fool for the City from Foghat, out September the 12th. Also out September the 12th, if you're into this sort of thing, and I've already kind of expressed last week my misgivings about this, the brand new album from Spinal Tap, The End Continues, which of course coincides with the release of their new movie, Spinal Tap 2, The End Continues. Both the album and the movie will be out again September the 12th. That seems to be a pretty big day coming up here in a little over a month in the world of rock and roll. So, I was kind of vague on the David Gilmour live album because I'm not going to cover any and every new release if it's not brand new material from somebody I actually care about. Tribute albums are, again, something else that I really don't care about. And of course, you guys should know by now, after the last few months, I was so disappointed. So disappointed in Magic Power, the tribute album for Triumph. And it wasn't just Nancy Wilson's abhorrent, pathetic version of Fight the Good Fight. But there were songs on there, Sebastian Bach, one of my favorites included, where they seemed like they kind of painted by numbers, mailed it in. Let's hope this tribute album is a little different. The lineup on it looks amazing, but so did the lineup on Magic Power. Can't get enough. A tribute to Bad Company will be out October the 24th, right around the time, of course, they get inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Can't get enough will feature, among others, Dirty Honey, The Struts, Hailstorm, and my favorite, of course, would be Slash featuring Miles Kennedy and the Conspirators. So, the Struts, I believe they're doing Rock and Roll Fantasy. That's the first release. We'll check that out here at some point. Maybe we'll review it. I'm trying to be a little bit more stringent in terms of what songs we review here. We'll see. That's all I'm going to say. We'll see. The Struts aren't my favorite. They're okay. I've seen them in concert a couple times. Very energetic, but I'm not as smitten with them as other people I know are. So once again, can't get enough. A tribute to Bad Company will be out October the 24th. And then finally here to wrap up news of the world. Of course, last week we discussed, and it's coming up soon. It's coming up very soon here, kids. Just a few minutes away. We discussed Billy Joel. And so it goes. The massive, roughly 5-hour documentary on HBO Max. Last week we discussed briefly part 1. This week in Breakdown, we will review part 2 and the entire documentary as a whole as one of our featured reviews. Now, this is cool, though. Now, this is only streaming. I can only imagine why. When I tell you the details, you will probably agree with me. This is why the soundtrack to this documentary, and so it goes, has been released on streaming only so far. Who knows what the future holds? But Billy Joel has released a 7-hour, 155-track soundtrack accompanying the documentary on HBO Max. 7 hours, 155 songs. Amazing. Amazing. And you know what? I applaud Billy Joel for this. Because unlike Bruce Springsteen, who overprices his lost albums here recently and tries to gouge his fans for $250 for 7 CDs, Billy Joel just says, let's put this all out there for the people to listen to. And I know you could just listen to the Bruce Springsteen stuff too. Wherever you listen to your streaming, Spotify, Apple, Tidal, wherever. I know that's the world we live in, but some of us would like to own the music. But at least Billy Joel's, at least to this point, here on August the 1st, is not making any promises about releasing this in a physical format. He's just saying, here it all is. This is all the music that you heard snippets of, pieces of, in the documentary. So I say kudos to Billy Joel for doing this. At some point, we'll dig in and listen to it. Probably not going to review it. But for a Billy Joel fan, a diehard fan, a completist, this has got to be Christmas in the middle of summer. So with that being said, we move on to segment 2 here, which is each and every week on the Fortress of Rock Breakdown, our tribute to Tom Petty and his band, the Heartbreakers. Now, you already know what's coming here in a few minutes. Our review of Billy Joel and So It Goes on HBO Max. But first up is our featured album review of the week. And that would be the new album from Bush, I Beat Loneliness. And of course, we will have a review of Bush with Shinedown live in concert towards the end of August. But for now, 12 tracks on I Beat Loneliness. And of course, as always, we will go through the album track by track. Now, the interesting thing for me about Bush, I am not the biggest Bush fan in the world. I know they came up with the heavyweights in the grunge era. But to me, they were almost more of an emo band. To me, they were almost the first hard rock emo band. They kind of took grunge and pushed it even further into a more vague, introspective form of music, and played around a little bit more, stayed away from the darker themes, but still tried to address sadness and loneliness and depression. I still will take grunge any day of the week. Give me Stone Temple Pilots and Soundgarden and Pearl Jam any day. But that's not to say that Bush doesn't have their high moments and their good points. Their first couple albums are really, really good. And something we've always talked about here on the Fortress of Rock is a band usually peaks. Usually, not always, but usually peaks with their first album because they've had years and years to write songs, distill, and refine what they're doing before they actually get that contract with the record label and are able to put out their first album. Now, sometimes a band gets signed very quickly based on promise, and they need more time to refine their sound. We just recently talked about Queens of the Stone Age and reviewed their very first album. That is an example of a band that needed time to find their footing. Bush followed along with the more typical timeline, where they peaked early, and now the question was, can they sustain their momentum? Now, it would be hard for me to say they haven't, considering the fact that we're now on, 30 years? Pretty much 30 years of Bush. And they're not headlining shows anymore, at least not big shows. Again, opening for Shinedown here later on in August at the show I'm going to see. And there's a reason for it. There is. I was discussing this with a friend of mine. We both listened to the album. And yes, this is my friend I do my other podcast with. And I was actually a bigger Bush supporter than him. Now, this will be the first time I've seen him live in concert. He's seen them before. But he's not the biggest fan in the world of Gavin Rossdale and the boys. Of course, the lineup has shifted and changed over the years, but it's still Gavin Rossdale, I was more supportive of Bush, but I did admit I walk a fine line with this band. I really do. It seems like just a little bit, lyrically or musically, one way or the other can push me to liking a song or disliking a song. Because unfortunately, musically, they sound the same. Most of their songs have a similar structure, similar themes, and unfortunately, you can't say that the new album, I Beat Loneliness, is any different. Now, first off, can I just tell you, I hate the title of the album. I hate the title of the album. That is a weak, terrible title for an album. Yes, there is a song on the album called I Beat Loneliness, but you could come up with something much, much better, something that would pull people in much more than I Beat Loneliness. Which again is, you got those emo themes going. And Gavin Rossdale can't get away from it. And I'm very torn on this album, by the way, as we start to get into the songs. Because lyrically, he has got some really good lyrics on this album. But my problem is musically. Now, I said already that they all sound the same. Bush songs tend to all have the same sound, with very minor changes and tweaks. And that's where I think Bush fails as a band. There are very, very few artists, when you form a group, and even if you're a solo artist, and again, we'll get to Billy Joel here in about 5 minutes. And Billy Joel will discuss the group dynamic of the band he put together during his most productive years. Same could be said of John Mellencamp. Bruce Springsteen, of course, with the E Street Band. When you don't have that group dynamic, when you don't have somebody who's maybe not an equal, but close to being an equal, pushing you, forcing you to be better, forcing you to look at what you're doing and say, okay, some of my stuff is good, but maybe some isn't up to par. That's what Gavin Rossdale needs in Bush, is he needs a second person in this band to tell him, we need to do this, fix this, tighten this up. It's too late now. It's way too late. 30 years in, it's not going to happen. He would have to start a whole new band with somebody else. But bear with me. If you listen to Bush, you'll notice there are never any blazing, ridiculously cool guitar solos. There are never the awesome group dynamic that you hear in other bands where, like, of course, Van Halen, where the members were almost all equals for a long period of time. And they all had influence, and their particular sound and feel bled into the overall band's recordings. You don't get that with Bush, and that is the frustrating thing about Bush, is that it's Gavin Rossdale. Like him or hate him. Accept him for what it is or not. And I'm right in the middle with Bush. I always have been. So we start off, I Beat Loneliness, with Scars, which is I know they've released this as a single. I believe it was the third single. Came out right around the time they released the album. I don't like it. Okay, I just don't like the song. This is stamped, certified, grade A, generic Bush. If you had to put it in a museum, a music museum, say this is a perfect example of a mediocre Paint by Numbers Bush song, Scars, would be it. And it upsets me greatly that you would start the album off like this. And of course, it's got the pathetic emo lyrics where pain is a focus for release. Yuck. Yuck. I don't think we'd ever hear Stephen Pearcy or David Lee Roth or Vince Neil singing that. And then next up is the title track, I Beat Loneliness, which you could almost put right behind Scars and say, well, if something happens and Scars gets stolen in our museum of mediocrity, we could just move up I Beat Loneliness to take its place. So right off the bat, the first two songs, not impressive at all. But here's where things turn around. And this is what's frustrating about Gavin Rossdale. The next 5 songs are great. And they're perfect examples of how Bush can be awesome when they want to be. When Gavin Rossdale wants to focus and change things up a little bit. Now, track 3, of course, is the second single, The Land of Milk and Honey, which is by far the best song on the album. And that's why this one is getting the most attention, and has been for the last couple months, of any of these songs, is because it is very catchy. Now, I can't quote my favorite lines from this song, but there is a great little 2-line refrain that Gavin Rossdale sings about seeing stars. You'll have to look them up, because again, we keep the Fortress of Rock clean for the kids. But it didn't take much to tweak things from those first 2 songs to make a really catchy, awesome Bush song. Arguably the best song they've put out in a long, long time. The Land of Milk and Honey is phenomenal. Now, track 4 isn't as good as that, but it's still very cool. We're all the same on the inside. Yes, it has that emo, weak title, but it's much better than that. Another great line that I liked, I got a pocket of angels but a head full of sorrows. Yeah, I don't know why. For some reason on this album, I really zeroed in on the lyrics, because they just jumped out at me, for better for worse, at a lot of points on this album. Then after that, you go to another solid song, I Am Here to Save Your Life. Gavin Rossdale gets a little dark, gets closer to that grunge feel. Gets away from the emo stuff, gets more to the grunge feel. A little bit of a dark Nirvana STP feel towards the end, where he keeps singing, I know where you've been, my love. I know where you've been. And he says it in his gravelly voice, and he does a wonderful job of making it sound menacing and really brings something to I Am Here to Save Your Life, and makes it a very solid rocker. Then the first single is track 6, 60 Ways to Forget People. Not a bad first single. And if it was on a stronger album, it would be a nice addition to a stronger album. It would probably be middle pack in terms of quality. But on this album, it's one of the best, simply because there's so many mediocre to bad songs at the beginning, and yes, coming up at the end. There's something in there. There's something in this song, a lost potential. Of course, when I reviewed it originally, I believe I brought up the fact that when you start going down that road with 60 Ways, the first thing people are going to think about is Paul Simon. They're going to think about 60 Ways to Leave Your Lover. And I thought if Gavin Rossdale was more creative and more clever, he could have played off that better. But all you really get is 60 Ways to Fall to Pieces, 60 Ways to Forget People. Not bad, not great. Solid. And then this nice run here in the middle of I Beat Loneliness ends with Love Me Till the Pain Fades. There is a harmonica in here. Again, when Gavin Rossdale puts his mind to it, he can shepherd a great, great rock song. And Love Me Till the Pain Fades is another good example on this album. This harmonica howl that punctuates some of the lines in this song. Tremendous, brilliant idea. And then that's where the album, for all intents and purposes, ends. Because most of the next 5 songs are terrible, boring, even below average stuff for Bush. We Are of This Earth could put you to sleep. Honestly, you could put this song on instead of your white noise machine and it'll probably knock you out quicker. We Are of This Earth is dull and terrible. And then Everyone Is Broken is a typical Gavin Rossdale mid-tempo, weird mishmash of lyrics. He's singing about we're all ghost dancers, whatever that means. And then it sounds like he's got children backing him in the chorus because, of course, he's got a line saying the kids have all spoken. And yes, again, just the title is emo. It is. And then you move on to track 10 and you get more of the same. Don't Be Afraid. With more of his when he's focused on his lyrics and they're good, they lift the song up, but here they drag the song down. Now you've got another emo title, Don't Be Afraid, and then you've got this Stoplights, Don't Think Twice. Okay, what the hell does that mean? Track 11, Footsteps in the Sand, actually much better. A little bit of a reprieve here from this bad run we've been on. Footsteps in the Sand is a solid rocker, which I liked. But then we end again with another mid-tempo snoozer, Rebel with a Cause. So yes, if you've been keeping track, we have split this album completely down the middle. I liked 6 of the songs, and I disliked 6 of the songs. I can't recommend I Beat Loneliness. I just can't. It's right there on the fringes. But this is, again, how Bush operates, how Gavin Rossdale operates. With the exception of his first couple albums with this band, when they peaked. This is, again, how the rest of Bush's career has been defined. Mediocrity. Some great stuff, some terrible stuff. It all balances out to, Again, I'll say very close, very, very close, but I cannot recommend the new album from Bush, I Beat Loneliness. We will see here in the next 3 weeks or so how they are live in concert. At the Gainbridge Fieldhouse in Indianapolis, opening for Shinedown. But we push Gavin Rossdale and his band aside and now move on to our other featured review of the week, the 5-hour documentary on HBO Max, 2 parts, I don't understand why they didn't do a better job of splitting it up and stretching it out a little bit more, but if there's anybody that deserves 5 hours in terms of a documentary, it is Billy Joel. The great, the glorious Billy Joel. So let's dig into our official, formal review of the HBO Max documentary, Billy Joel, and So It Goes. All right, so Billy Joel, and So It Goes. We discussed a little bit last week about part one. And that cut off right around the time when Glass Houses was huge. And his momentum, his career momentum, was carrying on through from The Stranger to 52nd Street, and then, of course, to Glass Houses. Part two of the HBO Max documentary picks up after that. Now, I will admit, as a Billy Joel fan, a big Billy Joel fan, that the latter part of his career did not excite me as much. I am a admitted hater when it comes to the album An Innocent Man. Not like the critics. And they do address Billy Joel's antagonistic relationship with the critics. And you guys should know by now how I feel about critics. Critics are people who couldn't do, so they criticize. They're bitter, angry, nasty people. Same thing I say about Hollywood celebrities. They were always the outcasts. They were always the ones that couldn't find their place, couldn't make friends, so they had to turn to creating characters. I'm not so much bitter about actors and music performers, obviously, because they did figure a way through their emotional problems, their personality issues, and they turned a negative into a positive. Critics take a negative and turn it into an even bigger negative. And that's why I despise critics with a passion. Everybody's got an opinion. I've always said this. You guys can run with the opinions I give you, and I try to give you the fairest opinion I can. But if you don't agree, that's fine. I've always said, whether it's an album, a song, a book, a movie, there's somebody out there in this world that thinks, past, present, future, that particular work of art is the greatest ever. And I'm fine with that, because I'm sure there's a ton of stuff that I listen to, stuff that movies, music, TV shows that I adore that other people go, wow, that's garbage. And I would say the same thing about things that they watch. But that I'm not trying to denigrate other people's opinion. But critics do. That's why I hate to even think I'm being a critic. I'm just expressing an opinion. A critic gets paid to tear down people or build people up, which of course leads you to a situation that could be rife for payola, very nasty, dirty things. So Billy Joel was never the critic's favorite. And I've told you guys all throughout this podcast, we're going on 4 years now. All 4 years I've been doing this, I have told you. Rolling Stone, a bunch of hypocrites, a bunch of scumbag hypocrites because of the way they treated bands. Van Halen, Journey, Triumph, and then in a lot of cases, especially with Van Halen and Journey, they turned around and, we're going to revise our reviews now. Years later, because now these bands have been widely accepted. and they're going into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Of course, they still despise Triumph because Triumph isn't going to that next level. So you've got that where you've got the critique of An Innocent Man. I do not want to draw parallels to my feelings of that album versus the critics' feelings. I've never been a big fan of the 50s and early 60s doo-wop stuff. That's not my music. I really start with the Beatles and move forward from there. Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, that type of stuff did nothing for me. But there's no need for the critics to pile on Billy Joel like they did. And it turned out to be a massively successful album. And then that was around the time when he was smitten and in love and married Christie Brinkley. Now, a lot of this documentary has to do with his wives, especially part one. Focused a lot on his first wife. And then in part two, we get the viewpoints of the three other significant others in his life. And I will say this, probably the most powerful moments, because I am all for a documentary being honest. Don't do the Bon Jovi. Yes, I'm going back to the Bon Jovi Disney documentary. Don't whitewash everything and make John Bon Jovi seem like he's some kind of pariah because he screwed over his fans and went out on tour when he knew he couldn't sing and was more than happy to take their money. Give me honesty. I want warts and all. And this documentary comes pretty close to giving us an honest assessment of Billy Joel. Now, for me, there's a little too much of the whole, well, let's bring out all the heavyweights of music, Sting and Bruce Springsteen and John Mellencamp, to talk about how wonderful Billy Joel is. Come on. Okay, we get it. We don't. That was unnecessary. That's showboating is what that is. We didn't need that. But on the flip side, Christie Brinkley, almost breaking down in tears. And we knew this part of the documentary was coming. It started off a little bit of foreshadowing in part one. In part two, you get the full force of it because this was a significant part of his career where his manager screwed him over and took him for millions of dollars. And it was all over the news. And Billy Joel basically had to start from scratch, even though he had mega selling albums and singles. And the heartbreaking moment in the documentary is when Christie Brinkley, and I don't think she was the only one, but of course she was his wife. And she goes to Billy Joel and basically says, your manager is taking advantage of you. Where's all the money? And Billy Joel says, I've known him longer than I've known you. And I'm paraphrasing. So butt out. Bad move, Billy. Bad move. But honest. Honest. I respect the honesty. And then we get some discussions from his children, biological children, his stepchildren. It's still not quite all the way to where I would have liked it to have been in terms of the darker side of Billy Joel. They discuss his alcohol abuse. The part that I think they left out, which disappointed me because I know a lot of this. Again, very dark stuff, but he had a lot of problems within his band that he put together. Not at the beginning, but he put together his group of guys. And famously, as we learn in the documentary, he told George Martin, the producer of the Beatles, to hit the bricks because George Martin wanted to use different musicians, and Billy Joel said, no, I've got my guys. These are the guys I'm working with. These are the guys that understand what I'm trying to do, my vision. But later on, and Liberty to Veto is the one I circle. Now, there was a suicide involved with another one of his longtime band members. I get it if the family didn't want it discussed. So maybe a pass there. But for Liberty to Veto to come on and act like, for the most part, everything was hunky-dory, there was a very bitter dispute between him and Billy Joel about his being dismissed from Billy Joel's band. Now, I don't know if money changed hands or what happened, but there had to be more arguments, ugly scenes, especially if Billy Joel was drinking, the other band members were joining in, than what we're led on to believe here. So even at 5 hours, we still really don't get the full picture. But overall, an unbelievably comprehensive job of looking back at Billy Joel's, his life, his career, the awful, and this is another strong part of the documentary, the awful relationship with his father. Heartbreaking, along with the Christy Brinkley moment, some of the disclosures about his father and their distant relationship. Again, these are positive things when you're trying to show the full picture of the performer, the artist. And I will always give Billy Joel credit for one thing. Even though as a music fan it kills me to say this. But if you're going to go out, you're going to call it quits, to this day, I can't think of anybody in music who went out on a higher note, at least in terms of recorded music, than Billy Joel. After The River of Dreams, he said, I'm done. I'm going to move into classical music. Yes, he's released a couple songs over the decades since, but still, he had the guts, the integrity to say, I'm done. I got nothing left. I'm going to go out with great stuff. Obviously, Famous Last Words, a fitting ending to his recording career. And I know some people don't like that. They think it was manufactured and fake and phony. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So, yes, again, I'm a Billy Joel fan, so I'm a little biased. But this is one of the better rock and roll documentaries you're ever going to watch. Still a little flawed, but for the most part, very good, very solid. Covers the good and the bad fairly well. The music is great. We talked earlier about the 155 songs, 7 hours of music that are now out there. The soundtrack for And So It Goes on your favorite streaming service. Wholeheartedly, if you have HBO Max, I wholeheartedly recommend you go out and you watch Billy Joel. And So It Goes. Great, great music documentary. Yes, I'm a sucker for music documentaries, especially the ones that are official. The ones that the band sanctioned. Now that can be a double-edged sword, because a lot of times, Bon Jovi, again, they're going to sugarcoat things and try to turn themselves into, golden gods, when maybe sometimes that's not really warranted. But I think for the most part, they do a good job keeping a nice balance with Billy Joel. So check out And So It Goes once again on HBO Max. And that leads me to my weekly stroll out to the garage here at the Fortress of Rock, where I say howdy to the man with the big frizzy white hair, Doc Brown, as he has got the rock and roll DeLorean warmed up, going to get us up to 88 miles per hour, 1.21 gigawatts. And we're going to fly out, drive out, soar out into the rock and roll time stream for our third segment. I want to go back. Of course, our tribute to the late, great Eddie Money, as we look back at anniversaries of classic album releases, birthdays, and significant moments in rock and roll history. But as we're getting up to speed, got to take care of some business real quick. Trying to get this down where it doesn't take up more than a couple minutes. First up, main sources for some of the ideas that I expound upon every Friday night. The opinions, of course, the rants, the ravings, the lunatic fringe I might push myself to the edge of. That's all me. But the core ideas sometimes come from other places. Three main sources: the Van Halen Newsdesk.com. Haven't had significant Van Halen news in a while, ever since the news of the re-release of Balance. So, might be a little quiet until we get closer to the release of the third album from Mammoth. Who knows? ThisDayInMusic.com. Very important for this upcoming segment. I want to go back, and then for segment 1 specifically, UltimateClassicRock.com, a great source for daily rock and roll news. Now, where can you find the Fortress of Rock? You found us somewhere. As always, just let me stress to you that you have options and choices. You can find the Fortress of Rock each and every Friday night, new episodes, and then, of course, the entire back catalog. All the other 204 episodes are available on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Apple, iHeartRadio, Overcast, Amazon Music, Castbox, Audible, Good Pods, and YouTube. And then, of course, don't forget to check out the Facebook page. That is our social media presence. I'm just not into getting into the muck and mire on X or Instagram. And nobody wants to see me dance on TikTok, so we're sticking with Facebook for right now. But two fun things that happen every weekend on the Facebook page. First up, tonight, it's already out as you're listening to this brand new episode of the Fortress of Rock. The Weekend Rock Project is out there for your amusement and enjoyment. Every Friday night, I will give you a word, a phrase, an idea, a theme, a concept. Sometimes I'll even just ask for your favorite songs from a particular band if they're out on tour or they're in the news. Haven't done that in a while because people don't seem to like that too much. But this week, your Weekend Rock Project. We just talked about Spinal Tap and their brand new movie and their brand new album, The End Continues. So we've got the concepts of the beginning and the end. So why not ask for your favorite songs with beginning or ending, or begin or end, or begins or ends? Any of those 6 words. Give me your favorite rock and roll songs with those words in the title. That leads us to, as we're now up to speed in the rock and roll time stream, birthdays and anniversaries for August the 1st. Let's start off with anniversaries. Starting with August the 1st, 2000. AC/DC. We might never see them live again. That breaks my heart. Fortunate enough to see them one time live. But I've already expounded on the fact that I thought the last tour was way too expensive. I know they only had a limited amount of shows in them. I get it, but I was not going to pay $250 to sit half a mile away. But back in 2000, much, much better venue to kick off the Stiff Upper Lip Tour. That tour began on this day in 2000 at one of my favorite, if not my favorite, indoor venue, the Van Andel Arena in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I'm very bitter, by the way. As a personal aside, this year has been awful for Van Andel. I have not seen any good shows come through Van Andel this year, and it is, again, a phenomenal venue. And it just breaks my heart. I don't know if it's the bands that are touring, and Ruoff Music Center, formerly Deer Creek, were on a boycott on them. But still, their lineup wasn't all that much better for being one of the preeminent outdoor venues in the country. So just not a lot of great tours, not a lot of great shows this year. But back in 2000 on this day, a definitive, phenomenal show. AC/DC starting up the Stiff Upper Lip Tour in Grand Rapids, Michigan. On this day, August the 1st, 1987, MTV Europe launched. Now, of course, we all know one of the easiest trivia questions ever. When MTV launched here in America, the first video they played was The Buggles. Video killed the radio star. What was the first video ever played on MTV Europe when it launched on this day in 1987? The answer? Money for Nothing by Dire Straits. On this day, same day, August 1st, 1987, the number one single in the United States was Bob Seger's Shakedown. Very interesting notes on this. Of course, this song was featured on the soundtrack to Beverly Hills Cop 2, originally meant to be sung by Glenn Frey of the Eagles. But at the last minute, they had to do a switch. I don't know if Glenn Frey was ill. Something happened. Maybe lost his voice. And Bob Seger had to step in. He tweaked some of the lyrics. And lo and behold, even though the song is in no way, shape, or form fitting in any way to his overall catalog, it was his one and only number one song ever in the United States. On this day, August the 1st, 1981, one of the most iconic songs of the 80s was number one in the U.S. on this day, and that would be Jesse's Girl by Rick Springfield. On this day, August the 1st, 1980, Def Leppard made their live debut in the United States, opening for AC/DC in New York City on the Back in Black tour. Wow! Would that have been something? Not only are you seeing AC/DC as they skyrocket to legendary status with one of the greatest albums of all time in Back in Black, but you also get to see a young Def Leppard opening up for them. Amazing. And that all happened on this day in New York City, August the 1st, 1980. On this day, August the 1st, 1971, a couple very significant things happen in the world of music. There's two different sides to this coin, okay? One thing very serious, very important, even though I have a disdain for hippies. But on this day in 1971, of course, again in New York City, Madison Square Garden, this was the day the concert for Bangladesh was held, shepherded by, of course, George Harrison. Now, on the flip side, a little bit of fun. On this day, also, in 1971, the Sonny and Cher Comedy Hour debuted on CBS in the U.S. Then finally, for anniversaries on this day, August the 1st, 1964. Yeah, we just talked about George Harrison, but very hard to slip a week by without some Beatles tidbits. On this day in 1964, A Hard Day's Night by the Beatles was the #1 single in the United States. So that leads us into birthdays. Pretty big day for birthdays. So we start off with August the 1st, 1968. Dan Donegan, guitarist for Disturbed, was born on this day. Obviously not my cup of tea. But then we get into one of my favorite songwriters of all time. Born on this day, August the 1st, 1964, the great, quirky, goofy, but awesome beyond all belief, Adam Duritz. Of course, lead singer, songwriter for The Counting Crows. On this day, August the 1st, 1960, the birthday of Chuck D. Of course, one of the main members of Public Enemy. Born on this day, August the 1st, 1959. We just talked about him a few minutes ago. The great Joe Elliott, lead singer, frontman for Def Leppard. Born on this day, August the 1st, 1953. Guitarist extraordinaire. Had a brief flirtation with stardom. Of course, the great, great song, Smoking Gun. Yes, I'm talking about Robert Cray, born on this day in 1953. Born on this day, August the 1st, 1951, one of the founding members, you could tell by the last name, of Bachman Turner Overdrive. Tim Bachman, born on this day in 1951. Born on this day, August the 1st, 1947. Rick Koontz, drummer for the Grassroots. And I did some research on the Grassroots. They actually have a very impressive catalog of songs. Might have to do some more digging into them, listen to some more of their music on Spotify. Born on this day, August the 1st, 1947. Rick Anderson, bass player for the Tubes. Talk to You Later. Great song. Great song. Of course, Bad Company has been in the news a lot lately. They're getting into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We just talked here at the beginning of this episode about Can't Get Enough, the tribute album to Bad Company. Born on this day, August the 1st, 1946. Their bass player from the classic lineup, Boz Burrell. Again, bass player for Bad Company, born on this day in 1946. And then finally, back to the hippies. Oh, the hippies are mad, by the way. I didn't want to throw this in with the news because I really don't care, but the hippies are mad because I guess ticket prices for this Dead and Company show in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco are outrageous. Go figure. I think I've been saying that for years and years about the concert business and the greed of the bands and the promoters and Ticketmaster and Live Nation, but who listens to the Maestro, right? So they're all mad about this Dead and Company show on their home turf in San Francisco. But meanwhile, born on this day, August the 1st, 1942, I guess you could call him the lead hippie, the head hippie. Make some cool ties, used to. Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead, born on this day in 1942. And that is going to do it for I Want to Go Back. Doc Brown is turning us around in the rock and roll time stream. We're heading back to the Fortress. We're going to pull into the garage, pull up the drawbridge over the moat. Even though it's a beautiful, beautiful summer night, temperatures have dropped to where they're actually bearable, reasonable. But we're still going to close things down, turn off the outside lights, release the sharks into the moat. Just kidding. Too many lawsuits that could be involved if we did that. But I'm going to wander back into the studio now for our fourth and final segment. Of course, as you know, we have looked at present day rock and roll throughout our first two segments. We just got done looking at the past, so now it is time to venture forth into the future. Segment 4, Wrap It Up. Our tribute to the fabulous Thunderbirds as we look to the future. What's going to be coming up in the next month or so here on the Fortress of Rock. Now, unfortunately, even though there's a lot of new music coming out towards the end of the year, specifically September, October, all of a sudden these bands are being very frugal, very stingy with releasing new songs. So we really don't have any new songs on the agenda for next week. Now, we do have some we're going to play catch up with. We've still got Robert Plant, along with his new band. First single from that upcoming album, Saving Grace, is Everybody's Song. I came really close. I needed to listen to it one or two more times. I'm going to wait till next week. I want to listen to it one or two more times. I do like it. It's a cover song. I want to do a little more research on this album. From what I can tell, there's a lot of cover songs on this album. Not a fan of that. But still, Everybody's Song sounds really good from Robert Plant and Saving Grace. Hopefully next week. 95% chance that next week I will review Everybody's Song by Robert Plant. Then we've got another new song from the Black Moods, still upset about the fact they don't know how to market their music anymore. You can only buy their new album, Passion. If you go to one of their shows, you can't get it anywhere else. Oh, you can buy it from their website, but they won't tell you what songs are on it. Terrible marketing. Terrible business practices. Terrible way to promote yourself. They should let me take over. I went to school for this. I know how to do this. Anyway, their brand new song, I'm assuming it's on Passion. Suit Yourself. We'll have that for you here in the next week or two. Unless they decide, by some stroke of genius, to let all the rest of us in the world hear the new album, then we'll just keep doing it piecemeal like they seem to want us to do. Again, you can't even release it digitally? I don't understand what they're thinking here. And then, of course, we've got the new songs from Rob Thomas. 2 new songs released, Hard to Be Happy and Thrill Me, from his upcoming new album, All Night Days, I believe it's called. That is out September the 5th. So again, that's going to be another one of these albums we're going to be reviewing here once we get to the fall. We got plenty of stuff on the agenda. Just not a lot of new songs. Albums, yes. Concerts, yes. Songs, no. Where is Alter Bridge, by the way? Where is Alter Bridge? How do you announce a new album and don't release a single for 2 weeks after announcing a new album? Boggles my mind. Another band that needs some help in the marketing department. And I love both those bands, Alter Bridge and the Black Moods. But come on, guys. This ain't working. It's not working. Our episode lineup hasn't changed from last week, but we'll run through it real quick anyway. Next week, the brand new album from Honeymoon Suite. It is out now. Wake Me Up When the Sun Goes Down is our featured review. Episode 206 dropping August the 8th. Don't be surprised if that episode hits a few hours earlier than normal. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Then in 2 weeks, Great White and Slaughter live in concert, Shipshewana, Indiana. Episode 207 dropping August the 15th. In 3 weeks, as the concert reviews roll on. In 3 weeks, Stephen Pearcy, Warren DeMartini live in concert, otherwise known as Rat. The heck with you, Bobby Blotzer. It's Pearcy, it's DeMartini, it's Rat. Live in concert. New Buffalo. Four Winds Casino, episode 208, dropping August the 22nd. Now, this is where the concert logjam starts up, because we've got 3 concerts scheduled in 4 days. And I don't want to just give you one knockdown, drag out, blow it all in 1 week extravaganza, so I'm going to stretch them out. And at some point here, by the way, I have not forgotten the new documentary about Collective Soul, Give Me a Word. We will review that here in the next month. I'm still just not sure what episode we're going to drop it in. It's going to be one of these episodes with a concert review, though. Because we're going to have about a month with no new albums after Honeymoon Suite, so that'll be a good time to drop that documentary review in. In 4 weeks, again, as we stretch out the concert reviews, in 4 weeks, live in Indianapolis, Indiana, Shinedown and Bush. That'll be episode 209, August the 29th, and then in 5 weeks, a mammoth extravaganza of an episode because this concert I've been looking forward to for a long time. David Lee Roth live in Gary, Indiana, and our review of the brand new album from The Hives, The Hives Forever, Forever. The Hives, that is episode 210 on September the 5th. You do not want to miss that one. That one will be fantastic. Just because my favorite personal music wrapped all up in that one. Old school Van Halen, because I have heard that now that David Lee Roth has started this tour, some of us call it the unretirement tour. He's tweaked it a little bit, but it is still wall-to-wall classic Van Halen. And of course, the Hives are just awesome. The Hives are the Hives. So that leaves us with the Fortress of Rock charts for August the 1st, 2025. Of course, I've always told you guys about how much I loved the old school Billboard charts and would read them in the supermarkets and in the bookstores every week, every chance I could. Listen to Casey Kasem in America's Top 40. And that was the true gauge for popularity when it came to these songs and these albums. And of course, like everything in this world, it got screwed up right around the mid-90s. First it was SoundScan, then it was streaming. It's idiotic and stupid, the protocols that Billboard now uses to rank albums and songs, especially albums. So we decided we would have to fix it. So for the last year and a half plus now, we've been doing it with our own charts here on the Fortress of Rock. So our number one album this week here on the Fortress of Rock, it was close, very close. It was a battle. There was not a clear-cut number one this week. Two albums fighting it out for the top spot. Had to give the nod to, yes, obviously, the album we reviewed this week. So the number one album, edging out Honeymoon Suites, Wake Me Up When the Sun Goes Down. The number one album is indeed, and again, the middle of that album is exceptional. It's the beginning and the end that stink. I Beat Loneliness by Bush is our top album this week. And our top two songs, because of course 2 is always better than 1. Don't you dare read into that. We figured, you would figure, I would figure, being smart people like we are, that probably one of these songs is going to be from that Bush album, right? And it is. So one of our top songs this week is The Land of Milk and Honey, making another appearance after a few weeks off as one of the top songs here this week on the Fortress of Rock. The other, again, we're all smart here in our little clique, our little group, probably comes from the other album that was vying for the top spot on the album charts. Love this song. You will hear me expound upon it more next week, as the album is our featured review, but Way of the World from Honeymoon Suite. Love it. Reminds me of the old Honeymoon Suite days. New Girl Now, Bad Attitude. That's the feel you've got here with the new song Way of the World by Honeymoon Suite. So, recapping. Top album, I Beat Loneliness by Bush. Top songs, The Land of Milk and Honey by Bush and Way of the World by Honeymoon Suite. And that is going to do it for your latest, your greatest episode of the Fortress of Rock. And we pretty much nailed it at an hour and a half. That's always our goal. I go crazy. Sometimes we go an hour and 45. Sometimes I got stuff going on. We go an hour and 15. But normally the target is 90 minutes, and we're right there. Enjoy the rest of the summer. It is now what I would say it's fleeting. Summer is almost over. God help me for saying that. About 5 weeks left, maybe 6. Early, mid-September. Then the weather's still nice in September, mid-October, and then it turns. And then it's 5.5 months of misery, at least where we are here with the Fortress of Rock Studios. So enjoy it, enjoy it, enjoy it while you can. We are. Got a ton of concerts coming up in August, so we will enjoy it every second, every minute of it, and you should as well. Hug your children. Kiss your significant other. Love the ones you're with. I'm the Maestro Kevin Crane. You are who you are, and until we do this again in 7 days, peace out.